with procurement tonight. Procurement looks kind of simple, but also has a few quirky things, like understanding different kinds of contracts. I have a secondary handout. I gave you about contracts yesterday, but this is a little bit more complete explanation on understanding the different kinds of contracts. It's interesting, this handout I got from American Management Association a few years ago. We were looking at the other day, my class that was finishing up, and they realized that there was a bunch of different orders of the way they had the contracts laid out, which kind of surprised us. But I think the order we've got it in for risk and everything kind of matches what the two books have. So some key concepts. A lot of times there's tied in with procurement and contracts, there's lots of legal obligations and penalties if things don't work out right. Agreements are always referred to in terms of the buyer and the seller. So we'll see both of those terms coming up quite a bit. Contracts have to clearly state what deliverables we're getting, what we having this vendor or third party make for us. And a lot of times there's more extensive reviews to make sure these things are in order. As far as most of the time in the projects, we are going to be considered the buyers, and in the exam that's true too. But occasionally they'll state that we're probably the sellers and talking about what we're giving or selling to the client. But the buyer-seller relationship is always there. There's been some advances in tools, I guess, for doing purchasing and procurement work. Some advances in risk management. Contract processes have been evolving, although a lot of contracts are still kind of stable, boilerplate kinds of things. I think in construction, a lot of industries, there's
AIA.
Yeah.
I understand it's a standard AIA contract.
AIA, yeah. Things have changed somewhat in logistics and supply chain too. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And different ways of, just like we're using for communications, different kinds of technology, that can be done a lot of times with ordering from a vendor or talking to the vendor to see what's going on. And I thought I corrected this, but the bottom one is supposed to be trial agreements. Goofy. And trail. It's a trail mix. That's funny. Some things we need to consider: how complex are these procurements going to be? Is it a simple contract? Are we ordering from one supplier or from a lot of suppliers? What are the locations of these groups? They right near our offices or our plants and get stuff quickly. What kind of regulatory stuff might be involved? Certain things. When I worked for UPS, there were very, very specific rules on how you transfer and shipped hazardous materials, and even more so when they would fly, next day or second day or didn't want to put some highly explosive materials on a jet going to Louisville or California, unless it was especially, properly packaged and everything else. Agile world, a lot of times the sellers or third-party groups are almost made part of the team, drawn in to work as closely as they can with the project team. So here's the three processes, too hard to read, so we'll go to the next one. So one, plan the plan, conduct procurements, and control procurements are three processes. We'll be studying inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. Again, We'll be looking at the buyer-seller relationship, talk about contract life cycles, a little bit about express or implied warranties and fitness for use, different kinds of documents. And we're going to have more on these coming up, but invitation to bid, request for proposals, and there'll be a lot of others too. 3 basic types of contracts. Got a taste of that last night with risk, but there's the fixed price, time and materials, and cost reimbursable. We'll talk a little bit about why do we do contracts or subcontracts? Usually to cover risk, but it doesn't wash away the risks. We're just transferring that to someone else to help us with it. And there's usually costs involved. So project procurement management includes all the processes for purchasing, acquiring product, service, or results. There's always that 2 perspective of buyer and seller. A lot of what we're doing there is really managing those contracts and being very careful to control changes to the contracts. Most contracts have built-in process procedures and things for change control, but the minimizing of changes probably the better. If we have a whole bunch of changes, it could mess up both the deliveries and the relationship with our vendors. And I think one of the things they're kind of getting at too is like the vendors or sellers we have are going to have to treat their work almost like a project too. They probably have to do their planning, have key milestones, delivery points, manage their team or the work they're doing. So the subcontractors and contractors are basically handling their bit of our work pretty much like a project a lot of times. And in red, for the purpose of the exam though, the questions are usually from the buyer's perspective, unless it states otherwise in there. So a buyer is sometimes called a lot of different things: client, customer, prime contractor, acquiring organization, service requester, purchaser. Subcontractors for sellers or vendor, service provider. One of my students didn't like the term procurement and everything until he saw a vendor. He said, "That's what you're talking about. You're talking about vendors." Yeah, well, that's one way to describe them. Oh, and I jumped ahead here, but this is where it's talking about the seller basically doing their work as something like a contract or a project too. So here's the 3. We're going to plan the plan, all the planning on how we're going to purchase, the decisions we're going to make, what approaches we're going to take, identifying good sellers, potential sellers, and managing, controlling the contracts. Execution 1 is going to be getting the seller responses and selecting sellers and awarding contracts. Control then is going to be managing those relationships and dealing with any changes or corrections that are needed as we're moving along. So plan the plan. What we're doing here is really trying to identify what of the project needs are best done either in-house or from an outside group. And we have to consider a lot of different things: potential sellers, legal and regulatory things, licensing. And one of the key things about what we're doing this is looking at, well, can we build this in-house, or is it better, cheaper, more efficient to get it from an outside vendor? So we'll be looking at make or buy decisions too. I'm going to just jump onto this. So the charter, those business documents for the business case, benefits management will feed into this. Scope, quality, resource management, the scope baseline in particular, because we're carving out part of that to have a third party do. Lots of documents, milestone lists, requirements documents, requirements traceability matrix, resource requirements. So a number of things here that are going to feed into this. Stakeholder register. Well, third-party vendors are part of our stakeholder group. And, the more we can keep in sync with them and work closely with them, the better. Bunch of stuff in the enterprise environmental factors, what's going on in the marketplace, what products are available. If this isn't the first time we've done this project, we probably have a list of pre-qualified sellers that we've used in the past and history on them. Who was good price, good quality and got the product to us on time. Well, they'd probably be higher in the list. I know there's one of those quiz questions where it talks about they only get it to us 50% on time. First off, time out there. Why we got a vendor that's only getting the stuff to us on time half the time? Unless it's the only one in the world that makes that unique product or thing. Even then, I'd probably look for someone else. So probably have contract management systems, local requirements we may have, or laws that we may have to keep in sync with. And this is sort of out of our, purchasing is not exactly something that we own as project managers. We've got to be really familiar with what's going on with that. But if we got a purchasing department, they'll do a lot of this work for us. So that'll tie into, accounting and finance too, on getting payments made and all that good stuff. We need to be aware of it. And if we're in a smaller company, we might be doing some purchasing ourselves. I have a new student in Gurney, and he worked in a company of about 20 people. So everybody there had multiple hats on. And we were talking about operations and project management stuff. They didn't officially have anybody called a project manager, but they did bits of projects. And they were also tied into the operations. And so they were sometimes wearing 2 or 3 hats, which I think gets a little more confusing sometimes. But he's begun to realize that, when we're talking about 300 stakeholders on this project, it was 300. Well, they had 20 people in the whole company, plus, maybe some of their vendors and customers. Pre-qualified sellers list. Probably have that out there, and procedures and guidelines and how we do this, and probably have some preference on what kinds of contract types we use. Here's a little bit about those 3 types. So fixed price, or lump sum it's sometimes called. It's one price regardless of whatever the cost is. A lot of times there'll be incentives or a fee or something built into it. But once it's set up and signed and everything, that's what the seller's going to get. Cost reimbursable, and therefore the seller has most of the risk. They said we can do the work for $2,000 and do it in 5 days, and it takes them 7 days and costs them maybe $3,000 to do the work. They're still getting $2,000. Cost reimbursable for the seller is a better thing, but more risky for the buyers. So they can put in all the actual costs, maybe a fee in there. If we have some penalties or incentives in there, that could be built in. And then time and materials is kind of that mixed thing or middle thing. Hourly contracts kind of fall into that. I learned, did I mention learning about the skylight and not having a fixed price contract, or a upper limit on my time and materials? Would have been good if I had that. This can be used for a lot of different things. Consulting sometimes falls into there too. If we're putting carpeting down, we may know the cost per square foot of the carpeting, but we're not quite sure how much square feet we're going to need to cover. Some things like that. A little bit more about fixed price. Usually guaranteed for fixed amount. If they complete early, well, it's good for the seller. They can go do other work then. It's actually good for us too, because we get the product or service early, and that might even help pull in our schedule some. Completed late, it's really not good for either side. It's probably going to cost them more to get the work done, and then we got it late, so that could push our schedule out too if it was a critical item. Sellers will generally build in some kinds of fixed fees, kind of their built-in profit. So if it's a $2,000 job, they might bid it for $2,500 or something like that. So that's built in. We wouldn't always be told that, but here sometimes we'll see that pop up. This is one of the ways we transfer risk. Maybe we don't have the capability or capacity to build whatever it is that we're having this outside vendor do. And so we're transferring that risk. And a couple times it's been pointed out recently that we're transferring the risk. That doesn't get rid of the risk. We've just got a partner now that's helping us with it. If they run into trouble, then we still got some trouble. Change control. for the seller especially is pretty critical. And here's the 3 examples of fixed price. Firm fixed price, or sometimes it's called FP, fixed price. Seller has, and for all of these, the seller has more of the risk than we do. Hi there.
Sorry.
Here's your stuff.
Thank you so much.
Here's
Thank you.
some new stuff too,
All right.
including book 4, which we're into.
Okay.
Fixed price incentive fee. It's a fixed price in there, but we may have something built in for them, you know, if they finish early, may give them a bonus or something for finishing early, or we might penalize them for finishing late. Fixed price EPA is economic price adjustment, and that's usually, I think, in longer term projects, over 2 or 3 years, where your cost of inflation goes up and down, or if we're dealing with countries that have high inflation. We're doing work with like Venezuela right now, or Brazil. Their their interest rates are going up and down. They're very volatile, but they're also pretty high. Cost reimbursable. Well, the buyer has all the risk with these. And these are less common, I think. The fixed price ones are the most common ones, but cost reimbursable are usually for things that we're not as familiar with. We don't have the expertise, something that we're not, something new maybe that we haven't done before. And the seller can put in pretty much everything, the direct costs, indirect costs, and the most severe one is a percentage of cost on top of it. And they may build in some kind of fixed fee or a profit into their way of thinking about it too. As it says, this is one, there's a lot of uncertainty on the requirements, and maybe we don't have the ability to build those things. It becomes difficult to audit from the buyer's perspective. And we're going to be responsible for any change control that comes up with these. Here's the 3 main ones that I talked about. And I know we had cost plus a percentage cost also on our worksheet, which was talked about in Rita's book, but I don't think it's talked about directly in Pinbach. Cost plus fixed fee, you get all their costs and a fixed fee on top of it. The fixed fee won't change no matter what the seller does in that case. Cost plus incentive fee, here's where they'll probably have a fixed fee in there still, but we may have a way, like if they finish early and we save $10,000, we might do an 80-20 split and give them 20% of that savings, that kind of thing. Cost plus award fee, we may have come up with some specific performance things that we want them to do, a certain level of quality, a couple other things, and we might give them a extra bonus or award fee for that. Time and material sense, kind of that in-between hybrid. Might have a unit price that's fixed, but you don't know how many units or what duration it's going to be. And hourly contracts, material contracts, a lot of times are like this. We have some risk in there as buyers and are responsible for managing the scope and controlling it. And like I said, if I'd known about this earlier, I would have had a not to exceed top end limit on the contract I had with, or wasn't a contract, the agreement I had with my friend. And if we cancel something like this, and the seller's kind of stuck a lot of times, so they got a lot of risk if we get canceled. Here's your chart again.
Sorry about that.
So I could give you this Marine's going to show up. And I'm going to suggest that you probably need to know the range of most risky, or least risky for the buyer to the most risky, or conversely, the other way. This is the least risky for the seller, and fixed price, firm fixed price is the most risky. And that handout I gave you has that subsection in which I think explains these pretty good. Agile does some similar things, but they also a lot of times build in some things into the contract to be able to work with the vendor, whether to save time or change what gets done. They may have the not to exceed kind of time and materials limits in there. But one of the things I thought was interesting, they would prefer a supplier that could give them everything to single product suppliers. And there was one thing, oh yeah, early cancellation. I like this. If they get done early, they might award the vendor with a extra bonus or something for finishing early. Tools and techniques. Make or buy decisions. Is this something we can build in-house, or is it cheaper to get it from an outside group? A lot of times it's because we don't have the capacity or ability or skill sets to do the work, so we may send it outside. I know we went through this. One of the last big things was a new box that was coming in for the new phone systems when we went from the old phone technology to LTE. We could build it in-house, or we could buy it from IBM. And it kind of went back. It must not have been an urgent decision, because I know it took quite a while for them to finally decide on it. But they did a lot of analysis on that, and as I said, it took a while for them to come up with a good decision. Sometimes it's not purchasing, do we rent, especially if it's a short-term need. We only need a tractor for 1 week. Do we buy a tractor for 1 week? Nah, probably not. May use lease agreements for stuff like that, or for cars and different things. There's various flavors of this, and they mentioned some of them here. Purchasing equipment, materials, outsourcing labor, software packages, consulting can fall into this too. Here's some of the things we need to consider, or experts need to consider as we're going through this. A lot of different things. Of course, cost and time, schedule, may be real important. Do we have the in-house labor? So a lot of different things there. Yeah, if we've got proprietary information, trade secrets and stuff, we may want to be very careful with what vendors we use, especially if they work with our competitors. And, oh, here, yeah, my company gave me this, pass it on to you. So our experts, in this case, probably people with a lot of expertise in purchasing, will be key in evaluating different proposals and figuring out what to do. We may need legal folks too. The lawyers end up getting involved quite often in terms and conditions, and dealing with any issues that come up in a lot of the contracts. Data gathering, we may do some market research, do some analysis on specific vendors and what they're capable of. And then eventually, we're going to make our selection. So these are some of the things we might consider. Least cost is not always the best. If they're not good in quality, we probably want to balance it off a little bit more, get better quality, maybe for a little bit more cost. Do we have one source that we get everything from, or do we get the same thing from 2 or 3 vendors? That sometimes reduces some of the risk. So a bunch of things to consider there. We'll see that there's lots of, well, the outputs of this will be the procurement document. So there's standard requests for bids, information or quotes. And so that's a lot of what we're doing. It's interesting, we're planning here, but we're actually sending out the requests to the sellers, potential sellers. And then in conduct procurement, we're actually going to be evaluating the responses and then giving out contracts. It's a little different. A lot of times in the plan one, we're just planning how we're going to manage it throughout the rest of the project. In this case, we're planning, but we're also doing some analysis on the make or buy decisions and who actually is going to do the work for us. And then looking at sending out these requests for bids to different people, or different companies. And as I mentioned, there's probably these lots of standard forms and contracts that can be used. This talks a little bit more about breaking them down in a couple of categories. Cost or unit focused ones. These are probably for things we've ordered a lot. You may ask for an invitation for a bid or quote. And we'll look for the response from the sellers. Things that maybe aren't as clear or we're not as familiar with, new technology or something like that, we might request information or a proposal instead of just a bid on something. And we might need to go through some iterations on that to come up with what we're finally going to get from the sellers. Looking at our different vendors, though, we may go through something like this, kind of a rate and rank system of the different vendors. And even though, does it mention in there? Key things like, high quality, on-time deliveries, reasonable cost, I think would be things that would be pretty important. The product that they're going to build for us, does it fit in well with what we're trying to do? Are there any of those things like the proprietary rights or intellectual property that needs to be protected? And so this can help us a lot of times if we got some kind of checklist like this to decide which vendors we'll go with. So the outputs of this will be the procurement management plan, which will describe how we're going to manage and control the contracts over time. What kind of strategies are involved? How is this product or service going to be delivered? How are we paying for it? Are we doing it in phases? What milestones and things need to be tracked? And the bid documents could be these kinds of things. Request for information or quotes or proposals. And quotes is probably for something more common that we're going to Office Max and Staples and 5 other companies that make pens or have pens and computers and stuff. A CDW, let's put CDW in there too. We want 20 new computers for MITS. Yes, let's do that. No, we don't need 20, I don't think. Maybe 10. And get the bids and look at the different proposals we get. Procurement statement of work. So we need to have enough detail in there so they understand what we're asking for in the contract. So the requirements should be pretty well spelled out. And ultimately, after we've sent all these things out, we'll be evaluating the bids that we get back and deciding who to sign the contract to. That list on the left is kind of like the one we had earlier where it was talking about the source selection criteria. There's product cost and life cycle cost, I think, comes into play sometimes. So, sometimes the cheapest one we could get might seem like a good deal at the time, but if we've got to fix it and send it back for repairs and everything else, and the initial cost was $10,000, but if we had spent $15,000, we might not have had this extra $10,000 of rework and warranty work and other stuff later, or just the stuff not working. So there's some things to balance off in there. The make or buy decisions we made, need to document those. Independent cost estimates gets at the idea that sometimes, especially in a lot of industries, there's lots of data out there, how much things cost, and can get some reasonability checks sometimes. A vendor says they can do it for 10 computers for $1,000. And I go, wait a minute, how are they doing that? There's some logic missing there, unless their father owns a supply company with a bunch of computers sitting around. And then updates to documents. Our lessons learned register, milestone list, requirements docs, traceability matrix, risk register, and stakeholder register. Risk register, if we're bringing in these outside vendors, third-party vendors to help us, most of the time it is to cover risks or things that we're not capable of handling. This new slide from PMBOK, kind of showing what we're doing, going through the planning, all the things we have to do there. Under procurement strategy is kind of figured out, when do we want things delivered, what kind of agreements we want to use. We're going to have phases in this delivery. Statement of work, describing how we're going to accept things, what performance we're expecting, what quality, how we're going to go through the payment schedule, and then the different kinds of bids. This is going to be a little exercise working through many kinds of possibilities. You won't have to do this many on the exam, but in this particular case, we're going to go through, figure out a contract. The estimated cost is $2,000. There's going to be an incentive fee of $150 a day. Pre-established daily rate, if we're doing it in time materials, $200 a day. Fixed fee of $300, and the target completion is 10 days. And we're going to do calculations for these 5 types of contracts for finishing on time with an actual cost of $2,000, finishing in 7 days, finishing early with an actual cost of $1,600, finishing 12 days, 2 days late, and the cost is $2,600. So I'm going to give you a handout, a worksheet with this on it. It's in the book too, but this one's a little bigger, perhaps easier to read. I think that's 2. Or 1%. I guess it's 2. And I'm going to slip over to the whiteboard. So they gave us actual cost. They want us to figure out firm fixed price incentive fee, time and materials, cost plus incentive fee, and a cost plus fixed fee.
We use coming mirror.
Pardon me?
We use coming mirror image.
Yeah, it's mirrored there, but it comes out right
Oh yeah.
On the side.
on the other side. If you're watching it right now, you'd see it normal. Yeah, don't look at the reverse whiteboard. So we're going to look at on time, 10 days. Finishing early in 7 days. Or late, 12 days. Now they gave us the actual costs in here for these 3, so we can actually track that too. It actually cost $2,000, so our estimate was really pretty good. We said, estimated $2,000, it actually cost $2,000. Finishing early cost $1,600 and finishing late cost $2,600. Now we may or may not know that information normally, but in this exercise we happen to know that. And this is what we're going to be using when we're calculating our cost plus contracts. We're not going to use that for fixed price. Fixed price is going to be a little different. So firm fixed price will be the $2,000 plus that fixed fee of $300. So this will be $2,300. The firm fixed price is set. So if they finish in 7 days, they still get $2,300. And if they finish late, they get $2,300. We're giving them that fixed fee in there too. And in this case, if they finish early, well, that's great because they've actually made $700 more, and they've also gotten done 3 days early, so they can go off and do other work. We've gotten the service or product 3 days early. Probably happy with that. Finishing late isn't good for them or us. Now we got the stuff 2 days late, and we only spent the $2,300. It cost them a little bit more, so they actually lost money by finishing late. Cost plus a fixed price plus incentive fee. Well, on time, it's actually going to be the same thing again. It's going to be the $2,000 plus $300, or $2,300. I think in this case too, they said we're not going to penalize them, so we're only going to look on the early side for giving him the incentive fee.
Why is it plus 300? Isn't the incentive fee 150 per day?
I haven't gotten to that yet. This finished on time, so there's no incentive fee for it. It was planned to be in 10 days, it finished in 10 days. Now with the 7 days, we'll see we're gonna have an incentive fee. So we'll have that 2,300 again. Plus we'll have 3 times that 150 incentive fee.
7 times 150, isn't it?
Pardon me?
It's 150 for 7.
They
for
finished,
me.
they did in 7 days, it was supposed to take 10, so they finished 3 days early.
Those 3 times 100.
3 times 150 would be
Um,
the actual,
Does not get it to.
Should we put 300?
Incentive fee, oh, okay, got it.
incentive fee was 150 a day.
Yeah.
And since they finished 3 days early, we're giving them 3 times that 150 or 450. And they're still getting the 2,300.
Oh, it's, okay, I got it.
And we're not penalizing them, so I'll say this would be 2,300, but if we were penalizing them, instead of being 2,300, it'd be 2,300 minus 300 for 2 days late. So that would be 2,000 if we were going to do that. They didn't, in this exercise, it said we're not penalizing them, so I guess we don't need to worry about that one.
It's still 2,300?
Still be 2,300. Time and materials. Well, I said 200 a day, 10 days, so 10 times 200 be 2,000. Pretty much like we estimated, pretty good. 7 days would be 7 times 200 or 1,400. And that's probably what we would pay with the time and materials. If we actually said if we actually did know this actual 1,600, we might have something to agree to do that. But if it was just time and materials, I mean, the hourly rate, this is what they would get. And 12 days times 200 be 2,400. So that'd be time and materials. Now for the cost plus ones, here's where we're using this actual cost. So this is where it varies from here. We might see 2,000 here is a different 2,000 than what we were talking about, like in this one or this one. Unfortunately, it just happens to be the same number. So for finishing on time, oops. We'll give them the 2,000 plus that. Even you can have these fixed fees really in any kind of contract. So we're assuming, I guess, we've got the fixed fee and everything. So this would be 2,300. Now this 2,000 is not the same as the ones up here. This is the actual cost for it. So this one, finishing early and giving them the incentive, their actual cost was 1,600. We'll give them that fixed fee again. And we'll give them the same thing we did up here, that 450 for finishing 3 days early. So it's 2,350. And over here, the actual cost was 2,600. So we'll bring that 2,600 down, give them that fixed fee. So this one would be 2,900. So why for the seller, you can see that this is going to make them a little bit more money. They're able to, this may look a little less, but when we look at it, if they're getting 2,300, their actual cost was 1,600. They're doing pretty good on that. Even on this one, finishing 2 days late, they're still making $300 over that actual cost. Cost plus fixed fee. This is on time. It's actually going to be the same. This will be 2,300. In this case, it's 1,600 plus that 300 fixed fee, or 1,900. And over here, they're getting the 2,600.
Goes back, so whose face is that?
Who what?
Who's that on this face?
That's Janine from my other class. And I think we have Dee on there too,
Oh,
who's auditing the class just to see what we're doing.
that was spooky.
Spooky. Hi, Janine. Hi, Janine. She can't see us unless we stand up here by the whiteboard, because that's what's showing up right now.
Can you hear her?
No, she's on mute.
She's on mute, but she could talk to us if she has questions. And I have an answer sheet for this too. Again, this is far more than you're going to see on the exam, but you will be asked these types of questions. They may give you some information saying that with the firm fixed incentive fee finishing 7 days with an actual cost of $1,600, what would the seller get?
Do you remember all these equations?
Pardon
Do you remember all these equations?
Of course. Oh, you the calculation.
me? You have the online calculator to do this? This isn't really formulas, it's more just adding and
But you have to know, like, okay, so this one is 2,000.
for the fixed price ones, the actual cost doesn't matter. With fixed price, we're going with, we had the estimate of $2,000. Unfortunately, it's the same thing as the actual cost,
Mhm.
and they were giving the fixed fee. The actual cost here for 2,000, 1,600, 2,600 is what we use in calculating the cost plus ones, because they're getting the actual cost for the work that they do. And then maybe the incentive or the fixed fee on top of it. Yeah, normally we can't see the people. I don't normally have to show you
Thank you, look,
the whiteboard.
who is not there? Like, who's that?
Who's that? And Janine was actually one of the first people to join today. She was here
Ah.
quite a while ago. That's a little bit about contracts. Again, this is far more than you're going to see on the exam, but you'll see some questions that'll ask you to do one or two of these calculations probably.
What?
Bless you. The 12.2 is going to be conduct the procurement process, and what we're doing here is we sent the packages out to potential sellers on our list, and we're getting the bids back, offers, and we're going to go through negotiating and figuring out which ones are going to be the best for us. The proposals may be as simple as a one-page limited kind of quotation, and some can be, lots and lots of pages, hundreds of pages. It's a very detailed and complex kind of contract. And ultimately, what we're going to do is award contracts, choose the sellers we want. Any thoughts on this? So lots of things feeding into this, lots of parts of our big plan. And for a number of documents too, the requirements docs, a schedule, lessons learned register, risks and stakeholder register. So what we're doing here is really selecting our vendors and signing the contracts and letting them go to work.
Where does the communication management fit into, the previous slide?
Yeah.
How does it communicate into procurement?
Because we need to hear how they're doing. We need status reports, progress reports from them. We may have key milestones.
Okay.
So our communication with them is going to be pretty important, especially if they're having trouble.
I thought it was looking from a cost perspective. Is the communications going to cost into, like, you know what I mean? Okay, sorry.
So a lot of it has to do with prototypes. Will those be here? You promised them on the 15th, are they gonna be on time?
They're going to be on schedule. Does the cost look like it's going to be in line with what we had contracted? And again, if we did a fixed price contract, we know exactly what the cost will be. If it's a cost plus kind of contract, that could grow quite a bit. So we'd be even talking more, I think, in a cost plus to make sure. We thought it was going to cost $10,000. Now you're up to $15,000 and you're only half done. Oh, this is, time out here. We need to look at this again. Did we just miscalculate the original estimate, or is it, something, is that legit, or is that something we need to question?
A lot of times people in procurement don't like project managers or other people calling their suppliers or communicating. They'd rather control the communication.
Yeah, and again, I think it depends, if we've got a good relationship with a lot of our vendors and sellers, we can probably work pretty closely with them. If we're a bigger company and we've got a purchasing department, they may do a lot of this, so we might be secondary in those situations, but we still need to know what's going on. We still need to have the information, your product's coming on time, or they're having trouble, or whatever the case might be. So we've got the bid documents, statement of work within there, and probably some kind of cost estimates on what it's going to cost. So we're reviewing those proposals, and we may again be using some of the enterprise environmental factors, our contract management system, what's going on in the marketplace, local laws, regulations. And I'm sure we're going to be, well, we'll probably started with that pre-qualified sellers list and use that to help figure out who we wanted to have bids on. Expert judgment now is going to be evaluating the different proposals that come in. And we may be using some weighted averages for some of the different things for cost and time and quality and different factors. We may have some special subject matter experts, maybe special expertise if there's some technical things that we need to evaluate. So we might be pulling in key leads from some of the functional teams. I know in my world we had software development, but we had 4 distinct development teams that did different parts of the software for the phone systems. So each one might be interested in if it's something that's going to relate to them, how it works. We'll probably negotiate, come up with a final deal. Advertising in some areas is non-existent probably. In other areas, like in government contracts and stuff, a lot of times they have to put things in advertising that they're going to have these things that they need. It's kind of interesting because it did say originally just like newspapers and stuff like that. Well, newspapers are almost obsolete or gone now. So internet, various places, I'm sure, things that have changed for advertising, that kind of thing. They even mentioned potentially some things through journals, professional journals. Bidder conferences are one way of doing, coming up with a decision on who we're going to go with. And there's certain industries where this is more common too. And sometimes in the government contracts and stuff, they may bring all the different potential vendors together and review things with them. So here's a little bit about why we do something like this. It helps on our side, and the buyer side, to make sure that everyone has the same understanding. They start out sort of in an equal position. We can determine what vendors are interested in helping us and which ones are just, maybe not so interested. It's also help if we made some kind of mistakes in our request for proposal. Might be glaring, hopefully not too big a deal, but if there are any little things that need to be adjusted or tweaked, we can do it at that point. If there's a facility we're going to go into or documents we want to look at, we can do that and introduce the vendors to our team. On the seller's side, they can get any questions answered they might have. They can scope out their competition too. And we'll see that sometimes they'll try to intimidate the competition or maybe partner with them. Because if we need 10,000 widgets and they can produce 5,000, but XYZ company can do it too. Let's have a joint thing on this. They might not decide that individually. I think we might decide that, okay, you guys make 5,000, you guys make 5,000. So we might have 2 separate contracts then.
Or they can just say, oh, don't bid the price low, just keep yours high and I'll keep mine high. I'll make money.
Oh, yeah. Oh, a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Next one. Yeah. I'm sorry, we're not contracting with you next time. Yeah. A lot of times they can scope out our buyers team to our purchasing team too and kind of see if they're strong and really know what they're talking about or if they're just kind of winging it. And I think we got a little bit more about that coming up in a bit. Data analysis. So we're going to be evaluating the different proposals we get, trying to make sure there's some clear understanding in there. We know what they're going to do for us, how ready they are to really work with us. Then eventually we'll be going through negotiating to come up with the final agreements, maybe clarifying some things in the structure of the contract, and ultimately getting it signed, hopefully something that we agree upon together. Ideal world. come up with a contract that both sides are happy with. So it's a win-win situation. Fair, reasonable price. We developed a good relationship with our vendors. That'd be the best thing. You know, these guys deliver on time, good quality, at a reasonable price. Okay, great. That doesn't always happen though. And here's some of the techniques that are sometimes used by different vendors or people that are trying to kind of slip one around or change things. Got a deadline, got to make the decision today. Good cop, bad cop, fair and reasonable. This is the best deal you're going to get. This is really just right. Oh, sure. Oh, no, never mind. We're withdrawing. We don't want to stay in here. Missing man and limited authority always makes me think of car salesmen. Oh, yes, I'd love to give you that car for that price, but let me go check with my manager. Yeah, okay.
Missing.
The missing person there. I'm not good with French. I used to say fait accompli, but I guess it's fait accompli. Fait accompli. Oh, the T does have a little bit of, I thought it was kind of silent.
Like a fait accompli.
Ah, I like the way you said that. I can't do it, but it's like kind of saying, this is a done deal. Why, there's nothing else to talk about. Let's just go for it. One party comes up with something totally surprising, totally different. Like you know, everyone's saying 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. We can do it for 5,000. What? Maybe they're trying to get into, you know, become a new vendor for us. They might have some legitimate reasons for doing it, or maybe they didn't really understand what we were asking for. Ultimately, we don't want to get to this, but arbitration sometimes is a way to settle things out. So the outputs of this will be the selected sellers and those contracts, those agreements, terms, conditions, all the legalese stuff signed by both groups. And within it, it'll contain things like this: the statement of work, probably a scheduled baseline, how we're going to report their performance, when they're going to report it, roles and responsibilities in there. Anything specific about terms of payment, stuff like that, when they're going to deliver, where they're going to deliver. And in some cases, we might have some warranty things built in for the rework or the problems that we might have, but it's not perfect product. And then also those penalties, incentives, you know, some of the things like we had over here, if we're doing incentive fees in there, both on the positive and negative side, they'd be spelled out pretty clearly in the contracts. And how do we handle changes? And how do we handle projects that are terminated or contracts that are terminated and deal with disputes? Might have had some change requests coming out of this. Change requests pop up, it seems like throughout our whole thing, through planning, a lot of times through, especially in execution, monitoring, control, because we're changing things. You know, maybe it's, you know, we could have the vendors do 90% of what we wanted, but we'll have to do the other 10% in-house. Okay, well, that's going to be different than our original plans, probably. Updates to a lot of documents now. Especially, you know, for the requirements documents, if we're having them do 20 requirements for us, that should be pretty well spelled out, and they would, you know, be owning that work then. And we may be updating some things in our OPAs, our pre-qualified sellers list. Maybe we got some new sellers, new information on some of the sellers, experience with them. A little bit about warranties. Express warranty is really pretty well defined usually in the contract, what we're expecting this thing or product to do. Implied fitness for use, usually not spelled out that clearly. So if I'm buying blenders, the expected express work is that I could grind up vegetables and fruit in it, no problem. For fitness use, that's what would probably be spelled out. If I try to grind up rocks in it, probably not part of what was expected. That's not the purpose of the blender. It was to process food, not rocks. So that's where the warranty, you know, if they had a warranty and they wouldn't cover that kind of thing. Oh, this blender doesn't work. Blades all got jammed up when I put the rocks in there. Okay, silly guy. And by the way, I use this clicker sometimes as an example of express warranty, it does some specific things. It's got a laser pointer in it, which actually doesn't show up on the screen. It's kind of funny that way.
That's weird.
So it's got a laser pointer. It's got, of course, it goes back and forth. It's got a button that actually just blanks it out. I don't know why that's in there. So it does different things. So those are, some of the things that would be understood that this little gadget should do. Questions about where is the seller liable? Client project manager is inspected and made their own judgment, accepting the product as is without relying on the seller's skill or expertise. Is the seller liable there? Yeah, no, maybe.
Seller,
Client manager inspected and accepted it as is.
Is as is, why would it be liable?
Would
If
the
you're
seller be
accepting-
liable?
If you're accepting as is, that means.
Yeah, that means we took it. Wouldn't be liable in that
no,
case.
would not.
Product meets all the specifications that were supplied by us as clients. Okay, that's what you asked for.
You own it, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're not liable.
yeah. A client uses the product for a purpose not discussed or envisioned by the seller. What do you mean you can't grind rocks? No, they're not liable in any of those. 12.3 then is going to be control procurements. And it's about time for a break. Want to break before we go through control here?
How was your first day at work?
I
Tiring?
ordered the office.
So like that one contract, it said that they accept it as is. A lot of times a project manager can't accept something as is,
No,
he should say, I'll sign for it, but I want engineering to test it before we agree to this.
yeah, it would be good.
I mean, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's overstepping his bounds.
I think that's what they're trying to get at there, that, if they've done everything within the contract, everything we requested. Well, that's what we asked for. And if the project manager decides to just, like you say, if he just signs off on it, asks no questions, okay, thanks. Well, that's,
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to sign off visual that it looks like it's in
yeah,
decent shape, but I mean, it's saying that it performs well.
yeah.
I would never put my neck in that noose.
Yeah.
No sugar. Okay. We got more sugar.
They don't, sometimes people.
So are you working or is Solly also looking for a job?
Still looking.
Are you are?
I had someone call on a contract today, and we talked for a couple minutes. I said, you know what? It's just not for me. I said, you know what? I could accept it. I could do well, but I said I'd be more. And I said, the pay rate you're looking at, you're not looking. Yeah.
Yeah, serious about it.
And that's exactly. I said, they're really not looking for somebody that has experience. I said, they're looking for somebody to come out of school.
There's a lot of that.
There is, and I find that actually more insulting than anything. You know, they're looking, to see how cheap they want to get people pay. I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. So after these, that's right, after signing for two more.
Use fast track forever.
So you started recently too. You started in the last week.
Watch videos.
How's it going?
Last Thursday.
How's it going?
It's good. It's very
Where are you
interesting.
I
looking?
don't want to get too far off.
Half a mile from here.
Oh, that's nice.
That's nice.
What's the place called?
Up group, the transportation company.
When did you start there? That's where I interviewed.
Huh?
There was the other place I got, Up Group.
I haven't seen a lot of you, but I'm kind of disappointed that.
What did you join as?
As a senior project manager.
Yeah, I mean, I was
You're reporting to who?
like I said, just.
Yeah. It's
I was
Business
doing well, I
intelligence.
get 3 in a row, 4 in a row, then all of
But
a
who's the
sudden, it's
person?
like.
director
I
is
like that test.
Anuja. What area you interview for?
BIE.
Are you aware?
Yeah.
Yeah, lead, they have a position, where is that?
There.
First they just got one, and then they just got the right away and locked in.
That is one I did not choose.
You need to go there?
Huh?
You need to go there?
Well, the thing is that the other place was giving me a full-time job right away. These guys were contract to hire.
Yeah, this contract is one.
Yeah, I know.
I seen it.
But I'm not sure it will be full time, right? This purple is contract.
But I was looking for full-time and I got a long time. I said, I think a full-time one. If you want, you could turn this to full-time and,
Pretty good. People get 100.
I dig it, but they didn't want to do that.
So.
So your current job is also BIU?
Somebody logged in.
That's awesome. Did you do it?
No.
I think that's what, I think they recently that did change, I guess. Yes, in March, if I look at the history, they have opening for project manager. And I don't think anybody hired as project manager. So
You mean
they're turning to contract.
the hub group? I don't know what they're doing. They want to streamline their
And then,
tableau reporting because there's all over the place, but the thing is that they need someone to come and fix it.
he said, okay, I'm gonna do it.
Lot of issues. I think that this,
He was in a small
Yeah,
company,
I could gather there are a lot of
so
issues.
he did projects.
I mean, Anu told me, she says it's not something which is like 9 to 5 job, it's gonna be a lot more than that. And I'm not afraid of that, it's just that I was like, so yeah, I have a full-time job now, so if you, I mean, that was my first option.
The one
They
that Yorkshire.
didn't want to make it full-time right away, so I.
you're my second priority.
So when's your next?
If you don't make a full time.
Yeah, then you never know what happens 3 months down the line, so we run out of, budget or something and suddenly that happens. What did you say?
It was 3 months contract.
When's the next one?
Yeah, and they said it could be earlier also, it could be 1 month.
To be determined.
And this one is taking a big dig out intro. His second.
Yeah.
Her minutes, but shoulder Saturdays, 9 to 5.
And,
Hmm?
then,
Dan, yes.
yes,
Yeah.
he's really good.
Uh,
Yeah, friends with it. Agile. Reality class.
So, yes, let's see. One thing is you get used to sitting at home and you're like so, so sleepy in the middle of the day.
In the middle of the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm
You
just
really get used to
so
that,
sleepy
you know?
now. I'm
So-
sleepy, yeah.
That was hard.
That's hard. So did you drink a lot of caffeine?
Yeah, I had caffeine. Luckily they had chai over there, which was nice.
Oh, tea.
Indian tea.
Oh, wow.
I had a really good tea too, so it's not bad.
There's even tea over there?
No, this curate thing has an Indian option. It's very good. Really nice, oh yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I didn't take enough food, so I'm hungry. So I just might leave early.
She's always at home.
I actually thought of getting some snacks out here, I totally forgot.
If you don't leave early, you will be sleeping last 1 hour, like I would just.
I was sleeping yesterday too. I was just like, oh.
It's a very long day, 3.5 hours after the work.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you're coming straight from work, right?
There's another one. I have to go pick up my daughter from Chicago.
Oh,
There goes my food.
you have to go pick up your daughter now? What?
She's in city, she doesn't have a car, we have one car between us. The other car is going with her son to the campus. So yeah, she took the train and now I have to go.
That's where the statistics about.
Take the metro? She takes the
She
metro.
took the metro.
It's gonna be a late day for her too.
5% for unemployment.
Me too. Let's look at some food.
2-3 more percent gave up time. and
Very weird.
Just across the mall. So she can just order some food. Just order pizza. I'm like,
Yeah, my cousin, I
Let's
saw
do it.
him profile, he was living out there.
seriously.
But he had gone to some job for something out there.
So when is our next class? It's not next week, right?
No, we don't have the class next week.
Correct.
There.
It's the week after.
And that's the last
It's
one.
like the 13th, 14th.
That's it. And that's it.
Two classes the week after?
That is the last two classes.
Oh.
Have some well
No, no, 2 classes, one in each way.
There are schools out there. I know
They will be
there's-
after next
I don't think it's too far from our school.
Oh, not one after the
Not
other.
consecutive.
I don't remember the exact.
Oh, I thought,
One is 11, one is 17.
okay.
Oh, that's good. That are like one class a
Those
week.
show will be review class, most
And
likely.
that will
will
be
be done.
what, Wednesday or
Some
Tuesday?
may be very specialized like that.
That's what-
Yeah,
It's interesting,
gonna
say hi to
get
her.
more than one class, I think, the one.
I was an amazing person. He works great. His boss was my student.
Yeah?
She was my student when I was 19, so that's how I know her.
Oh.
It's a small world.
When I went for the interview, I didn't want to tell her that in front of all the, and she also said, she was my instructor, and she was my teacher. I was like, okay, keep on. And I'm going to be working under you now, you know. It's a small world.
Very small world.
And that, I mean, he said half group, I'm like, he said half an hour for me, I said, oh, I can't be half group.
Okay, control procurements. This is where we both the buyers and sellers have to monitor what's going on with the contract, seeing if we're staying in sync with it. Maybe protecting our own legal rights under the contract. So we're gonna be, the purchasers, are gonna be looking at the quality of what we're getting. Ensure that everyone keeps up to their obligations. Reviewing invoices, approving, paying invoices, or rejecting payments. I was never directly involved with contract work that much, so I didn't see vendors that were asking for more than the contract said they should get, or where we didn't pay them in time. But I know that's one of the reasons in contracts, there's usually all sorts of stuff in there for figuring out what you do when you're not getting paid right. Or,
What a business.
yeah.
So did you at least get to see the invoices? Do you have to initial the invoices?
Do I?
Yeah.
As a project manager?
I didn't, because we had purchasing groups and stuff that did all that work.
But how did they know that the work was done to a satisfactory?
Probably working with our technical people, the people that would have, I wasn't the techie guy, so I was just a project manager or a program manager. But, our groups had actually put the contracts together and figured out, our system engineering group probably was quite involved. These are the requirements that we want you to do. And sometimes our vendors were actually our other divisions. For a long time, Motorola had what they call global software centers. And sometimes they were kind of separate little companies, which almost seemed like they were separate companies because they weren't under the same management structure and stuff. Sometimes they were right across the street from a Motorola facility. Eventually they got merged back in, but a lot of times they were kind of like a software job shop, and they would just do whatever was specifically, requested in the contract. And so I wasn't as directly involved with that, but I know when we rolled them in, they actually got merged in one of the reorganizations into the functional groups. And it was a different world for them because they could do kind of what they wanted and didn't have tight schedules and didn't have a lot of things. Did you do timesheets? Oh yeah, we do timesheets. Where are they? It took us a number of months to figure out this one group that wasn't really doing timesheets, wasn't doing schedules, and had to go ahead and train them on how to do all that stuff. Even though we had Primavera, it's this enterprise-wide system that everyone's supposed to be using. Not, oops. Yeah, if there's any amendments that come up, any changes, that goes up, all kinds of things that have to be mutually agreed upon in writing and added to the contracts. So for the vendor, they're treating their work pretty much like a contract. They got to direct and manage their work, control their quality. When there is changes, they have to go through the perform integrated change control process and do things they can to control their risks. They want to make sure, mitigate any problems, avoid any real bad things, and try to exploit any of the good stuff happening. Quite a long list of ITTOs. So a lot of things from their plans coming into this, a lot of documents. I think quality requirements, they're probably key ones. Milestone too, because they've got specific delivery dates. The agreements, any procurement documents that are needed, approved change requests. Now we got work performance information. It's very monitoring control, so they're getting the work done. So we'll be looking at this work performance information, same kind of stuff we do inside the project, plan versus actual, how we doing with that. And then enterprise environmental factors, we probably have internally things like a change control system, financial management doing their part on the finance side, or purchasing. We didn't mention purchasing, but I think they'd be out there too. Sometimes what's going in the marketplace may change what we're doing, especially if that vendor goes, they go out of business, that'd be a problem. And what is their code of ethics? Are they an upright company, or are they kind of tricky and sleazy and trying to get away with things? Not that we have any companies like that around, right? Sadly. Tools and techniques. Our experts, and probably our purchasing people, or people familiar with that particular bit of work that we're having this outside vendor do. We may need to pull in some law experts or compliance regulations people too. Claims administration may come into play here. You said you'd pay us every month on the first day of the month. We didn't get the payment. I just discovered Social Security is not as, I thought Social Security, I just started taking it in May. I thought, oh, it's going to be like all these other things. They'll come on that 23rd every month. Well, May came on the 23rd. And as of yesterday, it hadn't come for June. It's like, okay, now maybe a weekend would get in the way, but it's past the weekend now. So I think we'll be checking into that.
You cannot rely on that.
But
You cannot count on that.
yeah. My pensions, a lot of other stuff, boom, boom, boom. Always straightforward. But Social Security, I thought it was Well, I know it may eventually die, but I thought for now it would be good. And it probably won't die, they'll just print more money. I think we're up to the highest national debt that we've had in 50 years or something like that.
Yeah, we keep increasing.
Just turned that on the news this morning. While we're doing this, we may do some inspection and audits of the deliverables and also the work processes that our vendors are doing. A little bit about claims administration. This is where there's disputes over who gets paid what and when. And ideally, if we can just work it through between us, that's probably the best way to do it. Maybe having some kind of mediation would help. We don't want to go to the lawyers if we can avoid it, because it gets more time costly and everything. So negotiating is the preferred method. Contract change controls, usually very clearly spelled out in the contract, and there could be tracking systems, paperwork, all sorts of things related to it. And this will roll in and be part of, in our side, our PICC, our Perform Integrated Change Control Central Group. So they'll coordinate changes made there. Changes in contract need to be well defined. The reason for the change is very, very clearly understood. The impact this will have on the contract need to be mutually agreed upon unless the seller has already reneged on it. We may have to do a unilateral thing in that case. So the outputs of this would be the closed procurements, maybe new work performance information on what's been coming in, updates to our documents for procurement, change requests, maybe still some change requests even though as the contracts are getting finished, and updates to our risk management plan, procurement management plan, cost baseline, schedule baseline, updates to a lot of documents, and a lot of new information now going into our OPAs. The payment schedules and the requests, performance review of the seller, maybe an update to our pre-qualified sellers list, lessons learned repository, and all the procurement files, all the contract files and everything. That's procurement. 5th edition of PMBOK had another process, which has been folded in now to close project or phase. We used to have a separate process for closed procurements. So it's really kind of contained in controlling or in that separate one under 4.7, which is close the project or phase. Yeah, my new student was asking about that today. I thought there were 47 processes. Well, there were 47 processes. Now they're 49, but they've actually added 3 and took away 1. So we're net 2, but there are actually 3 new processes. And the closed procurement was taken away. And then they renamed a whole bunch of them too. More than you need to know. How about a quiz? Oh, yeah, how about a quiz?
Quiz.
I was waiting for it.
Wait, hold on. We're good.
Hearing voices. Okay, well, let's start, even if we're not quite finished with it, we'll go through this one. And I'll start. Which of the following terms does not refer to the seller in a buyer-seller relationship? Typically, the client would not refer to the seller. So C is the answer for the first one. Tanya, you want to do number 2?
Okay. A contract in which the seller is paid only a lump sum profit in addition to the reimbursed actual cost is a D, cost plus fix.
D in Delta is correct.
Oh. Thanks.
D is
I
a
thought it
dog.
would be-
Actual costs, though, they reimburse their actual costs and get a profit on top of it. So the profit they're talking about there would be like fixed fee, but a reimbursed actual cost, that's the open-ended kind of thing.
Okay, question 3. The buyer has the most risk when using a cost plus incentive fee contract. A.
Actually, it's a little less risky with that because we'll probably split any profit or benefit of finishing early if they finish early. So cost plus fixed fee, yeah, C is going to be the one for that.
On the chart.
Oh, John.
An agreement that is based on a fixed unit cost rate,
Cost per rate, cost per rate.
cost per rate, and variable quantity of unit is allowed. Is purchase order, fixed price incentive fee contract, time material. So is that time material?
Yeah,
See?
that's time and materials, yeah,
Yeah.
C.
Who benefits from the early completion of fixed price contract? Firm fixed price contract.
Mhm.
Early completion would be the buyer.
Actually, we both benefit from it. They finish
Okay,
in
yeah.
7 days, and they can go do other work, get more money on it,
That's right.
and we get the product and service early too.
It's C.
Yeah.
Okay.
So by that logic, the next one should also be C.
Who is harmed the least by late completion
Seller. So, I put B.
For the lease.
of a cost plus fixed contract?
Oh, cost plus?
I think it's A.
Fee.
Cost plus fixed fee means the seller can put in all their costs in there, it takes
Yeah.
longer, they add more
So
cost to
hurts
it.
the buyer.
So who's harmed least, though, is the question. Who's harmed least?
The seller.
Yeah, the seller. So B or Bravo is gonna be the answer to that one.
Number 7, which of the following is not an output of plan procurement management? Put C, is it Charlie?
You got team charter there? Oh, I got teaming agreements, another one. Yeah, that's right.
Teaming agreements?
Or charter, yeah, because that's not part of procurement. We're gonna see that when we look at resource management.
Next one is number 8. A procurement statement of work includes all of the following except, I put B.
Description of collateral services required, that's a possibility. Actually, I think what they're trying to get at was C.
Yes.
Our policies internally
Oh,
aren't something that necessarily need to have a
Procurement,
statement of work.
internal policies, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
seller risk ranked
Right?
from highest to lowest is,
Right.
hello?
Never mind.
Oh, okay. Ranked from highest to lowest. Just a test hint on this, if you got a list of things and time and materials on the end, that's not gonna work. So we need, and this mixed 1D doesn't work either because we've got fixed price and cost plus on both sides of time and material. We should see fixed price, time and materials, and cost plus to make sense out of it. For the seller risk, fixed price are the highest risks. So C is going to come out to be a good one for that.
But how do you remember this thing?
You kind of have to memorize it.
It's
You
hard.
have to memorize it?
Yeah.
A little brain dump or something?
Yeah,
Hmm. Okay, memorize.
So buyer risk ranked from highest to lowest is. I said. That's probably not C.
C,
A.
cost plus are more risky for us. Fixed price are the least risky for us. So of these choices, yeah, cost plus fixed fee, award fee, incentive fee, time materials, fixed price, firm fixed price is going to be the highest to lowest for the buyer.
Question 11, a request for proposal, RFP document, is an output of a plan procurement management.
Yep, that's correct. A for alpha.
Alright, number 12. Statement of work can be revised as required as it moves through the procurement process until incorporated in a signed agreement. Yeah, so unless until it's signed, but once signed, it's fixed.
It's fixed, and then we'd have to go through change control to change it. And PMP talks about this on page 477 and 478. But you're correct, it's true.
The seller plan, sorry. The conduct procurement tool and technique that provides meetings between buyers and sellers to ensure that all prospective sellers have a clear and common understanding of the procurement requirements is called bidder conferences.
Bidder conferences, yeah, D. E for Delta.
Who's up? 14?
The seller plant caught fire and will not be able to deliver the contracted parts on time. The buyer's project manager should evaluate, I picked D, evaluate alternatives and
Yeah, D is good.
impact the plan.
The best option.
Uh,
I'm threatening the seller.
What are you doing?
15, the seller identified the defect in his product batches and making corrections. This will cause products to be delivered 1 week late. This will delay project completion by 1 day. Project manager should work with the seller to identify ways to lessen the impact.
Yeah, we're talking about being 1 week late. The project's only going to be pushed out by 1 day. Can you guys just bring it in a little bit? Yeah, so that's a good choice.
So B or C?
C.
I
B,
put it
B.
C.
But in first, on the
Bravo.
14
Work
we
with
say
seller.
work with the seller.
Work with the seller to identify ways to lessen the impact.
But in the previous question, you say evaluate alternatives, so project manager think about try to minimize the impact.
Yeah, notify
And here
manager.
we say go to management, don't worry about minimizing the timeline.
Go to management? No, B is the answer for this one. Work with the seller to identify ways to lessen
B
the
is
impact.
What
But I'm confused because in the question 14, you
Yeah.
say, no need to go to management in this report instead of the evaluate the alternative plans. In question 15, we say, go to management rather than working with seller and.
No, we're saying B for boy,
B.
right?
He is a boy.
B is a
Work
boy.
with the seller to identify ways to lessen the impact.
Yeah.
B
On
is
15.
And
15 is B.
the end of the.
And with 14, A may or may not be needed, because if we evaluate the impact of that fire, it's not on a critical path. It may not, we may still be able to fit in, later delivery and things.
So as a project manager, try to minimize the impact, that's it.
Yeah.
You don't need to go management and just say, hey, this is-
Yeah, now if we can't do that, if they can't bring it in today, then we'd have to, we notify.
It's just by day, so it's not really that big of an impact, right? If it's a massive impact, then obviously it's going to go to
There's
management.
no offense. It depends.
Number 16.
Okay, number 16, control procurement.
Keith?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Keith.
One time?
Yeah.
He was taking a question.
Carol was so anxious, you wanted to.
No, you
answer.
were looking at me, so I thought, oh,
No,
what?
well, you're all back here. Just turned around.
I thought I could get 15.
Didn't he do 15?
Oh, you do
Yeah.
15, I'm sorry. Yeah,
So
16.
16 is mine.
I got sidetracked there.
Okay, number 16, control procurement includes application of the following project management processes within the contractual relationship except direct and manage project work?
That's part of what the control procurements will be doing. The contractor vendor is going to be directly managing their work, performing integrated change control, reporting on their performance. Specifically related to this, so managed project team is not part of that. So A for Alpha.
Oh, I think that's what I meant, and then I took it wrong.
Yeah.
I don't manage project.
Right.
A unilateral contract under which the seller is paid a preset amount for a specified item to be delivered by a specified date is called a purchase order.
Which is, yes.
Which of the following is true about procurement documents? A, bid documents are used to request proposals from prospective sellers. B, invitation for bid and request for a proposal are two examples of procurement documents. C, procurement documents should be structured to facilitate accurate and complete responses from prospective sellers. Procurement documents should be structured to make evaluation of bids by E, all of the above.
It's E.
And your answer is?
E.
E, all the above? Yep, that's correct.
Number 19, which of the following is a method for comparing an in-house or outside party cost calculation to the seller's bid price as a reasonability check? Weighting system, screening system, independent estimates, none of the above or all of the above?
E.
Well, it
All
can't,
of the above.
Actually, what they're
no,
trying to
you
get at.
can't. How can you have none of the above because it says all of the above? But it's none of the above, right?
So,
That's where I got,
too.
Yeah, so
that's
then-
actually,
Yeah, so you can't, D and E is not correct, so. it's gotta
D&E
be-
doesn't work together.
Yeah,
But as Rita mentioned, we're not always grammatically
That
correct.
is.
or perfectly. The actual answer though is independent estimates only.
Oh, that's the answer?
Yeah, so C, Pippa talks about this on page 479, and Rita also talks about it on page 527. We're talking about comparing, the reasonability check, I guess, is kind of the thing here. We get independent estimates from the outside, we can compare, and do these bids make sense, kind of aligning with what's going on in the outside world?
Which of the following are outputs of the conduct performance process? Selected sellers, agreements, change request, all of the above. Conduct performance process. All of the above?
All of the above is correct. D is correct. E for Delta.
Which of the following salaries, oh, sorry.
You're not reading that.
Which of the following
I see
are
right up there.
examples of indirect costs? Salaries of corporate executives, salaries of full-time project staff, overhead costs, A and B, A and C, and I said D.
A and B,
A and B.
No, I put C.
indirect costs, people working on the project.
No, they're not.
This is actually going to be a direct cost, I think.
That's it.
Oh, okay, A and B, it should be E then.
Yeah, E is correct. A and C, salaries of corporate execs, overhead
Yeah,
costs.
and overhead.
Oh. Me too.
Which of the following is not a tool or technique of controlled procurement processes? I actually picked procurement audits.
That's one of the things we'll do in controlling the procurements, audits and inspections and things.
Oh,
Yeah, seller proposal is actually an input into that process. So it's not a tool and technique, it's an input into it.
Oh, man.
So it
Yeah.
is D.
Tricky one. Yeah, so D for Delta on that one.
We got it.
Cost plus incentive fee contract has an estimated cost of $150,000, with a predetermined fixed fee of $15,000, and a buyer seller sharing ratio of 80-20 over and under. The actual cost of the project is $130,000. How much profit does the seller earn? I think D is important, $19,000.
19,000, correct.
How did you get that?
Let me flip my answer sheet in there. I'll show it.
I don't know how you got that.
So here's how it's calculated. So they got that 15,000. Original estimate was 150, only cost 130. So that meant they actually saved $20,000 on it. If we're doing an 80-20 split, usually we're giving them 20% of it. So 20% of that 20,000 would be 4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And the 4,000 plus the 15 then would be that 19,000.
Oh, wait a minute. I didn't get it.
Wait a minute here.
Okay, 150
Yeah.
minus 130
Uh-huh.
is the actual profit, right?
The amount they saved over the original
The
estimated
profit
cost.
is basically 20,000.
Okay,
And
but then the
20%
80-20 split means that they get 20%.
Yeah, 20% of that
So,
savings.
yeah, 20% of the savings.
Yeah.
Which is 4,000.
And then they have a fixed fee of 15,000.
So you add back the 15
Yeah, that, the 15,000 plus that,
equals 19. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Tricky.
yeah. A little bit.
Oh, that, a lot of it. Okay, 24. Which type of procurement document is used to request prices for common or standard items? C?
Yeah, the first quotation is correct. C for chart. Which of the following are characteristics of a purchase order? Well, it's not bilateral, it's usually unilateral, so these answers, B is gonna be the correct one. Unilateral contract used when routine and standard cost items are required. It's funny, those two questions are almost
What?
dealing with the same thing.
I didn't get that. Which of the following characteristics of a purchase order?
Purchase order is always unilateral.
Oh, so
I'm gonna order 1,000 pens from office.
purchase order, unilateral, oh. Okay,
Project procurement management processes include all except conduct procurement?
We got plan procurements, conduct procurements, and control procurements were our three processes.
Mm-hmm. Close.
And the one they took out of there, with the sixth edition, is closed procurements.
So they don't do.
Yeah, so
They need to go.
Delta is, D is the answer for that one. That's the exception.
Question 27. Outputs of control procurements include the work performance information, change requests, payment schedules and requests, correspondence, project document updates, and updates to the project management plan. That is true.
That is true. Pinbock talks about that on 499 to 501. And actually we had a slide, I think slide 150, made that kind of stuff in it too.
Good. 28, in Greenville, the project procurement management processes are discussed from the perspective of the buyer.
And the seller.
Balance of the
Oh,
It's funny
Oh, my
because
God.
on the exam, we're gonna be usually the buyer. It's still a buyer and seller though. So procurement processes are all fine with both groups in.
oh,
That question always seems to trip us up.
yeah.
For the exam purposes, we're usually the buyer. But who else are we working with? We're working with the sellers. So throughout the whole procurement thing, we're talking about buyers and sellers and buyers and sellers.
Inputs of land procurement management does not include project charter, A.
Actually, it does include the charter.
Oh,
Project management plan, project documents are included. Procurement audits are not named.
Audit will be later.
audits.
Audits are later on.
Yeah.
Okay, auditing will be-
You received a proposal against an RFQ that was sent to vendors. One of the vendors has indicated they can do the project for $12,500. The other project is, the cost of the other project is $10,000. And their profit will be $2,500. Which of the contract is most suitable for this? Cost plus,
Fixed fee.
Fixed price.
yes,
It should be fixed price, yeah.
Mhm.
We're good.
C.
correct.
B.
B. Fixed
Or
price.
just fixed
Oh,
price?
just a fixed price.
Yeah, just fixed price. They're saying they can do it for 12,500. Not saying add in more costs or anything else. It's
Oh, so they're telling you what their what their profit is?
yeah, they're telling us that, which may
Right.
or not happen, and the vendors will work with it. But they're saying they can do it for 12,500, so that's very much a fixed price.
From the buyer point of view, procurement is considered closed when final payment is made.
This is one we usually have lots of debates on, and I need to find some more references for it, but they actually went with administrative closure, final contract, performance report, closing, closure requirements as stated in the contract are all completed. So they went with B.
Oh,
It's funny because, I mean, we're doing all four of those things probably. Making sure people get paid, work is complete, lessons learned are completed, final payments made.
Oh.
But, and I need to get a page reference for that, but I think that makes sense. The whole administrative closure actually will include lessons learned, making sure everybody gets paid, final deliverable acceptance and stuff.
Lessons learned would be part of the project user, right? You don't do final payment until,
If we're closing out the procurements, though, we're gonna do our final lessons learned on that. Yeah, that may not be the end of the whole project. And we'll be doing lessons learned really throughout the project. So if we're closing out some contracts, probably want to do lessons learned on that too. What went well, was it a good vendor? Did they get high quality on time? All the different things we might evaluate them on.
okay.
Okay, number 32, while completing work on your project, the seller's subcontractor suffers a major fire. The fire destroys the heating system they were building for your project. The best thing to do is, I put B.
Yeah, be prepared to extend the delivery due date. These answers, that one works the best. Four stakeholders have noted a major change is required in the contract. Project manager is documenting the change request when he receives a call from the seller, informing him the seller's supplier has notified them of a price increase effective the next day. The seller is therefore asking for the change to become official right away. Generally, the project manager should. So there's two different things going on. There's a major change, but then there's this price increase on one item. And what they actually went with on this one was C, get the change signed by the procurement manager. So we're kind of passing it off to the procurement manager.
Weird.
I know it doesn't say it's a big or little price increase, so we don't really know, but it's probably, if it's the kind of thing they're asking for the next day, it's probably changing the price of pens or something not huge. I know we don't really know that from that question, though.
The answer is D.
The answer is C. Charlie?
You're trying to decide whether to lease or buy an item for your project. The daily lease cost is $150. The investment cost to purchase the item outright is $2,000. And the daily cost is US $50. In how many days will the lease cost be the same as the purchase cost?
I like this one. This is an algebra
It's
problem,
very simple, yeah, exactly.
but it doesn't always look that easy.
Right, because the daily cost, that's what's throwing me
We
off.
don't need to worry about it.
What does that have to do
We
with
don't need to worry about it.
the daily?
What we're trying to figure out is how many days would these two things be equal? Purchasing or the
What? How did you get that?
the daily lease?
So give you the daily cost.
Daily lease cost at $150,
$150.
So one
or if we
fifty multiplied
purchase
by the
it,
number of
Purchase it
days,
outright is $2,000.
150 multiplied by number of days equal to 2,000.
150 times.
50 multiplied by number of days.
13. So 13 will be.
Doesn't,
and you know, just an exam, hint on this one too. Some people go ahead and plug in those 4 answers and see which one works.
That's a good
Go
one.
backwards.
You can do it, yeah, you can go ahead the other way.
Go backwards.
But really, it's to me, it's like an algebra problem. 150 times days equals 2,000 plus 50 days per day. So by subtracting 50 on both sides, I got 100 days equals 2,000. And if I divide it by 100, then the days equals 20.
oh, I didn't do it.
Well, okay, 150
So it's
days equals
150
200 plus 50 days.
Equals
So then-
So
2,000.
the renting was 150 a day. The purchasing would be the 2,000 plus 50 a day for
That's
They call it-
50 per day,
daily cost. Yeah.
daily cost. Oh, I see. So then,
So 100 a day equals 2,000.
so,
So
okay.
D equals 20.
When I did this in math class, we usually went down on the paper. I just went across that.
Okay, hold on. And it,
So.
But this is an interesting one. Like I say, some students say, well, I just did 4 answers. I'll then work my way backwards to come up with which one worked.
2,000 plus 50, okay. So 20. So,
Okay? We've been working hard again. You want a short break before we jump into stakeholder management?
That's the last one, huh?
That's the last topic, yes. And after that, we're going to be going into a lot of review. So if we don't finish stakeholder management today, that'll just slide into our next class.
Getting there.
We're getting there, yep.